Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, making the world's easiest, cheapest, simplest forge. If you want to forge blades or heat treat your own knives, you gotta have fire. Now, if you're just getting started, the cost of all that gear can add up quick. So, today we'll be making a really simple, really cheap forge. Look, is this a lifetime solution? No, there's no free lunch in life, but it's a real forge, it's cheap, it's easy to make, and it'll get you started. Along the way, I'll show you where to find the material and what it cost me. Here's what we'll be using. A Venturi burner for a turkey fryer that I bought on Amazon, a couple pieces of steel tubing, some black iron pipe, a couple pieces of plumbing fittings, and 2 soft fire bricks. Yep, that is it. Here are a couple of fire bricks. I bought these from hightemptools.com on the web, $6 a piece. This stuff is not like a house brick. There are 2 main kinds of fire brick, soft and hard, and for this project we're using soft bricks. Now the disadvantage of soft fire brick is, yep, it's really soft. You could literally tear it apart with your fingers, so you have to baby it. The advantages are that soft fire brick heats up faster than hard fire brick, and all things being equal is a better insulator. Okay, quick note. I'm not Joe Safety Nazi, but you're dealing with fire, explosive gases, and some moderately off the beaten path materials here. So be smart. You don't want to blow up your shop or catch your house on fire, so be cautious about where you locate this forge and how you test and use it. More on that later. So I'm using a worn out blade, and this stuff is so soft it cuts like butter. I save all my old bandsaw blades for things like this. You could do this with a handsaw, but good chance you'll break the brick. You'll notice I'm wearing a mask. Also, I'll vacuum out the bandsaw after I'm done. I don't know that this dust is super hazardous, but I'm not hot on the idea of breathing it, and I really don't want the bandsaw kicking up clouds of fire brick dust for the next 6 months. Now our 2 bricks have become 4. One a little thicker, one a little thinner. Could we have bought 4 bricks? Yes, but think of the extravagance. Now I'll drill a hole to admit the burner. I'm just using a 1 1/4 inch spade bit. It goes very, very easily. Again, the main thing is you just want to go slowly and cautiously so you don't break this extremely soft fire brick. Next, 1 inch square steel tube, 3 feet, $10 or so at a big box home improvement store. Measure it so it's about 1 inch longer on each end. Chop them on the chop saw. Also 2 little cross pieces. Clean off the ends on my grinder. Of course, you can do this with a file or sandpaper if you don't have a grinder yet. Now I'll weld this little frame together. I have a welder, but if you don't, no problem. You can easily fasten this together by drilling some holes and running threaded rod or bolts through the ends and then bolting the whole thing together. It assembles like this. Yeah, that's it. Now for fire. I've bought this little Venturi burner intended for a turkey fryer, $10 on Amazon. For $26, you can buy the same thing plus a regulator and a hose so you can stick them right into the propane tank of your backyard barbecue. I happen to have a hose and regulator already, so I skipped that. Now I'll just take a hacksaw and cut the burner portion off here. Just to show that this works, here's a quick test. Tube goes in the hole, put a little fire in there, gently turn on the regulator of your gas, boom, you got fire. Just with this temporary primitive little setup, I can get all the heat I need for forging a small knife and certainly for heat treating anything in the hunting or utility knife realm. I'm just using a welding clamp to hold up the burner. Now, of course, I've got a real professional forge, so I'm just making this to be disassembled. But I'd highly recommend that you fabricate a more robust bracket to hold it firmly in place. You don't want to trip over the gas hose and knock your burner down and set off that big pile of dynamite in your floor. Just a little angle iron and some bolts will be enough to keep the whole thing from falling apart. Again, mine's going to be disassembled, so I didn't do that, but if you're going to insist on using it the way I've got it right here, where you're going to disassemble it all the time, absolutely make sure you put it someplace where if it falls on the floor, it's not going to set anything on fire. Outside, in a garage with a concrete floor, someplace like that. Speaking of hoses, like I said, I already had a hose, so I had to daisy chain a few fittings to go from the fitting that came with the burner, which is a 3/8 inch flare connection, to the NPT or standard American pipe thread that I already had on my hose. Your situation may vary. I spent under $10 on these fittings. Final touch here, I'll cut off a piece of 1-inch ID black iron pipe nipple to make a sleeve around the nozzle. Now I had this one sitting around my shop already, but you can buy one for under $10. I want about 2 to 3 inches to spare beyond the end of the cast iron venturi there. Why bother with this little sleeve? 2 reasons. First, it adds some flare to the nozzle, which will help stabilize the flame a little. And second, it gives you some distance between the cast iron nozzle and the fire. Cast iron has a significantly lower melting point than steels used in knife making. You don't want to find your venturi nozzle melting and dripping all over the floor of your shop. One final point. If you make something like this, it's not a bad idea to order some refractory mortar. I use a product called Satanite. You can find it in the same places you get your fire brick. Like I said, these bricks are extremely fragile. Even thermal expansion can cause them to develop little cracks. So you may need to patch a few things over time. If you don't plan to take the forge down after you use it, you'd be well advised to stabilize the whole rig with mortar, just like if you were building a brick wall. Also, a little mortar around the burner hole will help keep everything more rigid and keep all your flame inside the body of the forge. Alright, so we've got fire, but before we wrap this up, a couple of quick points. Okay, maybe not so quick. Maybe actually tedious and long-winded. But in all seriousness, if you really want this thing to work properly, reliably, and safely, you'd be well advised to hang in there while I hit the nerd button for a couple minutes. First, you want this forge set up on a metal stand or a metal table, well away from wood or other stuff that might catch on fire. I set mine on top of a couple of 25-pound dumbbells here. After operating for a while, this sucker will get screaming hot. So don't put it on a wooden table next to the draperies in a room stacked with gasoline cans and explosives. Second, a few general words about venturi burners. Venturi burners require some tuning. See, the way a venturi works is that the gas pressure provided by pumping gas through a tiny little aperture sort of drags air along with it. I mean, that's kind of the best analogy I can come up with, without going all physics professor on you. And that creates a mixture of air and gas that goes down the barrel of the venturi. And you have to get the mix right, not too lean, not too rich, and you can't force the air-gas mixture to go so fast that it outruns the flame front. So ideally, you also want to decrease pressure kind of gently by flaring the burner diameter as it gets out to the end. Point is, it's actually a little more complicated than you might think. So, to regulate all this stuff, you have this choke that allows you to control how much air enters the venturi and therefore what the fuel-air mixture is. Now, at different levels of gas flow, you need different choke settings. It's dynamic. It's not just a fire and forget thing. So, when you start up, you want it to be more heavily choked than once you get rolling nice and hot. So, here's the first wrinkle. The choke on this little gizmo that we have here is optimized for the original configuration, the one that was used for the turkey fryer or whatever. And that configuration creates a fair amount of back pressure or resistance to the airflow. So when you chop off the end of the burner, it kind of screws up this balance, and that in turn screws up the proper functioning of the choke. So, mods required. Here is my fancy mod. Masking tape. I'm just using plain old masking tape to choke it down a little further. Now, in the long run, you'll want to use something more durable and less flammable. Tin foil, metal tape, fab a new choke, whatever. But this will help me figure out the rough parameters of the choke. So I'll mark the point where the choke's working okay, and then later I'll use those as guides to make a more permanent solution. There's a performance point and a safety point here. Watch what happens when you get the choke wrong. Too much air and you get this sort of gulping thing. This often will end with the burner flaming out. Now, if that happens, cut off the gas immediately. You don't want your shop filling with gas. There's plenty of gas in this tank to blow up your entire house. I am not even vaguely joking. Also, you can have the opposite thing happen where flame kind of runs back down the nozzle and it starts burning right out of the little aperture right next to the choke. That's also not a good situation. Again, the second that happens, turn off your gas. Look, I'm not trying to scare you here. Well, okay, maybe I am. My general point here is that you don't want to be cavalier about gas and 2,000 degree fire. Don't store gas tanks in indoor spaces. Don't leave your forge unattended. Don't put your forge near flammable stuff. Don't run a forge in an unventilated space. They produce carbon monoxide, which in sufficient concentrations will kill you. I could go on. Bottom line, just be smart. Anticipate potential problems and solve them before they happen. Now, to the performance point. What you want is to have a nice, even, steady flame that more or less consumes all the gas inside the forge. If you run too rich, you'll have lots of dark blue flame coming out. That means you're wasting gas. Ideally, the flame should be sort of a pale, transparent orange. Not this orange, though. This means you don't have enough air and the gas isn't igniting until it hits open atmosphere. This is what you want it to look like. Feathery, translucent orange flame, nice and toasty. This will get you well over 2,000 degrees. Hot enough for forging, hot enough for heat treating. Can you forge weld in here and make that Damascus steel hand-and-a-half sword you've been dreaming of since you were 9 years old? Yeah, no. That's not what this is for. This is just a hobby, El Cheapo, transitional, get your feet wet forge. But given all those qualifications, it really works great. This is not a toy or a joke. It works. So once you get your rig set up, just recognize that you'll need to test out the choke, test out the different amounts of gas pressure and so on, and work on it until you get a nice hot little fire. So total cost to me, about 40 bucks. Depending on how you configure it, how much scrap metal you can scrounge out of the junkyard and so on, it might cost you 10 or 20 bucks more or less. Total time spent making it, maybe 2 or 3 hours, not bad. Again, the whole point here is to have just something to get your feet wet with. Recognize it for what it is. Treat it as fairly fragile, fairly short term. It's a stepping stone to something more permanent. And you're on the path to some pretty fun projects. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.